1 Corinthians chapter 9. Paul surrenders his rights. And here's what Paul says, okay? He says, am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are not you my workmanship in the Lord? If to others I'm not an apostle, at least I am to you. For you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. So I love the way the Message version breaks this down, guys. In case you're wondering, why is Paul saying this? He's kind of qualifying himself in this way. Check it out. He says, and don't tell me that I have no authority to write to you like this. I am perfectly free to do it. Isn't that obvious? Haven't I been given a job to do? Was I not commissioned face to face in work meeting with Jesus, our master? Remember, Paul met Jesus Christ face to face, was commissioned by him. And he says, aren't you yourselves proof of the good work that I've done for the master? Even if no one else admits my commission, you cannot deny it. Why? My work with you is living proof of my authority. So Paul goes on to say, this is my defense to those of you who would examine me. Do we not have the right to eat and drink? Do we not have the right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas, Peter? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working for a living? See, guys, there's comparisons amongst apostles, questions about Paul's apostleship. And, he's breaking it down. Hey, am I not free? Did I not meet Jesus face to face? Did he not commission me with a job? Don't put the Lord's brother over me or Peter over me. Put me and Barnabas in a separate category. We're all free. And here's what he says. Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk? Do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain. Is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he not certainly speak for our sake? It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in hope, and the thresher thresh in hope of sharing the crop. If we have sown spiritual things among you, and that's what we do, guys, we sow spiritual things amongst each other. If we sow spiritual things amongst you, is it too much to reap material things from you, right? Don't be afraid to give, and you guys are not afraid to give, but Paul is making this example in Corinth here. If others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? So check this out. Look, he says, we're not going to start demanding now what we've always had a perfect right to do. Our decision all along has been to put up with anything rather than to get in the way or detract you from the message of Christ. All I'm concerned of right now is that you use our decision to take advantage of others. Don't deprive them of what's rightly theirs. You know, don't you, that it's always been taken for granted that those who work in the temple live off the proceeds of the temple, and that those who offer sacrifices at the altar eat their meals from what has been sacrificed. And along those same lines, the master directed that those who spread the message be supported by those who believe the message. You see here, it's about taking care of each other, guys. It's about taking care of each other. And it's so great to see Paul break this down to the Corinth church. They had money. They had everything, you guys. This is a wealthy area, and the Corinth people, the city of Corinth, so to speak. And he's saying, listen, if you believe this message, you give from the heart, guys. We have every right to make our living doing this just as anybody else. And so he says, nevertheless, we have not made use of this right. See, he's not, rubbing this in their faces. He says, we endure anything rather than to put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. So do you see what he's saying? Right? He says, look, we have every right to make a living off of the gospel, but if that is going to deter you from hearing this message, if that's going to pull you away and say, look, I want to hear about Jesus, but don't talk about all this other stuff like supporting you and money. He says, fine, I'm not going to do anything to get in the way of the gospel of Christ. And he says, do you not know that those who are employed in the temple service get their food from the temple? Those who serve at the altar share in the offerings? In the same way, the Lord has said, the Lord has commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. How cool is that? And he says, but I have made no use of any of these rights, and I'm not writing these things to secure any such privilege. He's making it clear. He has every right to make a living off the gospel, but he's not writing for that purpose. He says, I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting. You see that? He doesn't want anyone to have any reason whatsoever. Taking the bullets out of the gun, guys. You can't fire anything at Paul where you're going to be able to say, yeah, but he asked for money. Yeah, but he tried to manipulate me one way or another. No. Paul says, I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of that. For if I preach the gospel, that gives me no grounds for boasting. For necessity it is laid upon me. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. This was some of my motivation for coming back here today, guys, and popping back on live on TikTok. You gotta preach the gospel. And so let's see what it says right here. 17, here it says, so I want to make it clear I haven't gotten anything out of for myself. I have voluntarily become a servant. Oh, hold on a second. I'd rather die than give anyone ammunition to discredit me or question my motives. See what I'm saying? Pulling the bullets out of the chamber here. He says, if I proclaim the message, it's not to get something out of it for myself. I'm compelled to do it. Now, if this was my own idea of just another way to make a living, I would expect some pay. But since it's not my idea, it's something that's been entrusted to me, why would I expect to get paid? So am I getting anything out of it? Well, actually, yeah, the pleasure of sharing the message. You don't even have to cover my expenses. That's what he says. So here we are, guys. He says, for if I do this of my own will, I have a reward. But if not of my own will, I'm still entrusted with a stewardship. What then is my reward? Here it is. That in my preaching I may present the gospel free of charge, so as to not make full use of my right in the gospel. And so he says, for though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. And to the Jews I became a Jew in order to win the Jews. And to those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, so that I might win some of those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those who are outside the law. And to the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of gospel, that I may share of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. Do you see what's happening here, guys? Paul has lived a life. He knows the truth of the gospel. He knows his identity in Jesus Christ. He knows who he is. He knows who Jesus is. And so he can speak to anybody, and he can relate to them. So if it's a Jew, he can be as a Jew. Under the law, as under the law. As a weak one, as someone who is weak, he can be weak so as to win the weak. Paul became all things to all people so that he may win some to the beautiful gospel of Jesus Christ. And so the mirror version, let's hop into the mirror version here. It says, So what's in it for me, you may ask? The pleasure of declaring the gospel of Jesus Christ at no expense is priceless. No, I am not cheating anyone or myself by foregoing the rights that I do have to make a living. So in a sense, I am free from everyone's expectation or management, and yet I voluntarily enslave myself to all people. This beats any motivation to influence anybody. I'm like a Jew to the Jews so I could win them. I'm disguised as a legalist to win those who are stuck under the law. To the Gentiles who have no regard for the Jewish sentiment, I became like one without any obligation to the Jewish laws to win them. Don't get me wrong, I am not sinning to identify with sinners. I am in the law of Jesus Christ. But I am so persuaded about everyone's inclusion in Jesus Christ that I desire to be everything I need to be in order to win everybody's understanding of their union with Christ. How cool is that, guys? He knows his freedom. It's amazing. He says, look, I don't present myself as super strong to the weak, but rather I expose myself to their weakness in order that I may win them. I don't distance myself from anybody. My mission is to be exactly what is required of me in every possible situation, to awaken every kind of person, whoever they are, to their own salvation. I have no other agenda. I'm loving this, guys. I love this. How great is this from Paul? He will do anything to reach anybody. If that is not a sign of Jesus Christ himself, I don't know what is. Paul is committed to sharing the good news. Jesus Christ is committed to you. He's committed to every unbeliever who comes on this chat and leaves real quick when they find out we're talking about Jesus. Jesus is just as committed to them as he is to us, guys. How amazing is that, right? How cool is that? So let me pull up this version here in the mirror version as I finish up what it says. Hey, Dana. He says, do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we do it to receive an imperishable. So I don't run aimlessly. I don't box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Guys, there's a lot of miscommunication and confusion about this verse. This is not about salvation. Paul is talking about, as you can see, his efforts to win everybody. He doesn't want to be disqualified. He doesn't want somebody coming up and saying, look, I love the message, but Paul's asking for money. Come on. He's probably doing this with other motivations. Okay, and Paul doesn't want anything to disqualify him from preaching the good news of Jesus Christ. And so here it says in the mirror version, let's check it out. It says, the gospel explains my lifestyle. It is so much more than a pulpit ministry to me. My life is inseparably joined to you in the fellowship of this good news. And that's how I feel about you guys. Athletes run a race to win. Their aim is to receive the prize, not just to compete. This is why I preach, to persuade you, not just to entertain you. Right? We want people getting saved. We want them to believe. It says the athlete knows how to draw from focused inner strength in order to win the crown. For them, all of their efforts translate into a mere moment celebrated by a fading wreath of honor. But for us to win, your faith is of an eternal, imperishable value. I run with a certain victory in every step. I'm not shadow boxing when I preach. I deliberately compare myself to the sacrifice and dedication of a champion athlete. In a similar fashion, I would pummel my body and subdue it. I would deny myself many things in my pursuit to win your faith, so that you will not have any excuse to reject my message. I want you, not your money. How cool is that, guys? How amazing is that from Paul? He's willing to go to any length to win those over to the gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ and your inclusion in him. You've been crucified with, buried with, and raised to a brand new life in Jesus Christ. And Paul is absolutely committed to sharing this news with everybody he can. And he doesn't want there to be any excuses. No one's going to call Paul out for his behavior or his depriving himself of food or not acting like he's under the law or like a Gentile or weak. He became all things to all men so that he may win some. What a great message, guys. That wraps 1 Corinthians chapter 9.